call on Joe Ogle now to make some comments.
Jerry Fowler said that he didn't have a speech. Jerry, I'm going to cut mine about half. You took half my time too, I think. And Jerry said he couldn't remember when he started the school here. I think Jerry came a year after I was in high school, and he graduated a year after I graduated. Wasn't that right, Jerry? But Jerry Fowler and I did spend some time in high school, and I think attended Mr. Perriman's classes. And I know that I could relate a lot of stories about this gentleman, a lot of them that would be repetitious over his years as agriculture teacher here at Kenner. But I'd like to say, Mr. Perriman, that I know, and being in the school business, the value of vocational agriculture programs. And there's some people in this crowd that do too. Many of you that are here tonight are actively involved in agriculture or some related business. But I think sometimes we're not as aware as we need to be of the importance of vocational agriculture and FFA programs in the public schools. And no matter what a person is going to pursue in life, vocational agriculture, there are elements of that will apply. Economics, some construction, some basic shop methods that I think any of us are going to use. But in this community, the vocational agriculture program has been vital. And Mr. Perriman has, I guess, as long as I can remember, Mr. James Perriman's been a vocational agriculture teacher in Kenner Public Schools. You know, Mr. Perriman, and there's several in this crowd know what I'm talking about, in the school business, we attempt to evaluate teaching. A few years ago, the state legislature required that a written evaluation be done of each teacher. Some of us told the people at that time that that's impossible, that it's too subjective. You can't evaluate truly good teaching. It takes years and years and years to evaluate the effect that a good teacher has. And in looking at this crowd, Mr. Perriman, I think that the only thing we can say is, as the old boy says, you done well.
Thank you, Joe. I commented a while ago that there hadn't been anything happened here in 37 years that Mr. Perriman hadn't been a part of. And I heard Carbell say that he was nervous all day sitting up there on the hill waiting for the phone to ring. He just knew that we couldn't pull this thing off without calling him. And we didn't do it as well as we would have with his help, but this is something we wanted to do for him from his former students. Jeffrey Peevyhouse, we'll call on Jeffrey now to come and say a few words.
Well, I graduated in 1984, so I started in about 1980 with Mr. Perriman as my VOAG instructor. Now, he taught me a lot, but one of the things I was impressed with, he was never late for school. I mean, no matter what time school started, he was always there an hour before school started. And I think Miss Perriman had a whole lot to do with that, because he enjoyed it, but school's school, you know. Well, when Mr. Wilson asked me one morning if I would like to speak at Mr. Perriman's banquet, honoree banquet, I jumped at the chance. Man, I got to thinking about all the tall tales and stories on Mr. Perriman, and I grinned all day, because believe me, there's some good ones. I got to thinking, now, I can tell about Mr. Perriman's driving and not have to add any to it, you know? But then, To his credit, he also has a perfect driving record. Well, then I thought, well, I can tell how excited he got one day when someone sharpened his brand new pocket knife with a grinder. Now, he was excited, but he wasn't all that pleased. But personally, I didn't think any of those stories were quite good enough. I figure he's kind of getting nervous by now. To my knowledge, Mr. Perriman only hates to hear two things. Number one is, Mr. Perriman, it took my money. Now, a student that would say that would be hoping that it was in a convincing tone of voice. He was referring to the pop machine that we have in the back of the shop, which helps finance our FFA chapter. Now, Mr. Perriman would either go check the machine and give him pop, or give him 40 cents and let him go get the pop. Well, he'd come up with a better solution to that. He carried all this change right here in his pocket. So much change, as a matter of fact, that he kind of leaned to one side when he walked. Well, he solved that problem as well. He took about 50 to 100 keys and put them on the other side, kind of to balance things out. Now, as far as the students were concerned, we enjoyed it, because now he couldn't sneak up on us. All was jingling and jangling as he walked. Now, basically, Mr. Perriman is a very calm person with nerves of tempered steel until he hears these words, "We're out of coffee." That is the problem. He is simply lost without that very important cup of coffee. Now, if you've ever seen Mr. Perriman walking across campus, now he probably had a cup of coffee in his hand. And if he didn't, he was on the way to get one. That was important. When we had class back in the shop, well, Mr. Perriman always had 4 or 5 things going, such as someone, 2 or 3 people building cat tables, and someone building loading chutes and cow panels. You know, there's always something to be done. And he'd run back and forth in between one project and another, telling us that we were doing it right, and complimenting us if we were doing it right, and getting on our case if it was wrong. But he always had this very important cup of coffee. Now, every now and then, he would forget where he set this cup of coffee down. So he'd just go get another one, and by the end of the week, there'd be cups of coffee, black coffee, everywhere around the store. Those are a couple of Mr. Perriman's funny little quips. But on a more serious note of Mr. Perriman was an excellent, excellent teacher. And he was a very serious teacher. He knew his stuff. And what's more, he knew how to communicate that knowledge to us in a way that we as students could understand. That's the mark of a very good teacher. In a metal shop, such as we have, it's a very easy thing, if you're careless, to get hurt. Now, Mr. Perriman was always safety conscious, and tried to watch out for us the best he could. If he said it once, he said it 100,000 times, and you've heard him say it most likely if you've had him in class. Fellas, no horseplay. Now, this rule was supreme and strictly enforced. As a matter of fact, probably 90% of the students that got to meet Mr. Perriman's Board of Education got to because of horseplay. Now, I did a lot of asking around, and I could only go back about 11 years. And to Mr. Perriman's credit, only 2 people were hurt severely enough in order to require any attention, any medical attention. Now, don't you think that's an excellent record? I mean, that is fantastic. But besides his scholastics, as a teacher, he had a very, very strong moral influence on the students. When a person considers how many students Mr. Perriman taught over the years, they become aware of what an unbelievably powerful moral contribution he has made to our community. But so many of the things that Mr. Perriman has done for us as students will be forgotten, except by those students. Each student that Mr. Perriman has had owes him a debt of gratitude for, one, being an excellent driver. Number 2, a fantastic teacher. And third, and most of all, for being Mr. Perriman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Jeffrey. As we all know, the VOAG program has been an extremely well managed and a real good program at Kenna during this man's time here, as is exemplified by several of the students that have graduated. Jeffrey being one that you just heard is an excellent speaker. The next young gentleman to be on the program has just returned today, as a matter of fact, from a trip to our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., that he earned as a result of some of his experiences and some of the things he's learned in VOAG class. So these are just two fine examples of the results of this program. Bobby Pugh, would you come forward and make your presentation?
Good evening. Tonight we're here to honor Mr. Perryman.